record. Hello, my name is Ned Dennison. I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We have one of our honorees with us today, James Kegley. James won one major, the 1987 World Professional Masters Swimming Federation, and he was one of the mainstays in the 1980s, touring the world. And we had a conversation with Phil Rush a couple of weeks ago. We wanted to talk to James, who was one of the guys that said he enjoyed his travels. So just wanted to get an idea what that life was like. So say hello, James, and tell people what you experienced with the highs and the lows.
Well, hi. Yeah, it's actually I watched Phil's interview. It's going to be hard to beat him in terms of he's an entertaining guy, and he was then too. But I started in 1980 and had never really known much about marathon open water swimming, but we started Atlantic City and then drove up to Quebec for La Tuque. Paul and I did La Tuque together, but yeah, that year we swam a lot right in a row. La Tuque, Lake St. John, and then Magog were all part of what we did that summer. And between the races is when we had a lot of fun. I mean, the races themselves, of course, are fun and grueling and hard. But yeah, we got to know each other and just kind of went from place to place and didn't know what to expect anywhere. And
were you 3 weeks in Quebec that summer?
Yes, yeah. Let's see. So 1, 2, 3. Yeah, for sure. And it was, everyone up there is in a very good mood. It's a big festival all week long, culminating with La Traversée, and it's in each of the different places, and they each had their own flavor, and the organizations had their own flavor. But I think the thing that was the same was the townspeople were all having a lot of fun, and that was infectious. And of course, the monster sponsor was Molson, and a lot of these are one of the big sponsors. And there was always a big Molson tent, and as one of the competitors, you could drop by pretty much any time. And that was just coming straight out of college. That wasn't a bad thing.
Was that the first time you had ridden in a parade in your own car with pretty women smiling and waving at you?
Yes, and Magog. I'm not sure if it was that first year, but Philip Rush and I remember sat there with having. We thought we shouldn't flaunt it, but we did have some Molson's kind of sitting behind us on the float, and we were all on that year on the same float, so it was kind of fun. Yeah. Other times I think we rode in cars and waved to people, which is not really a natural thing for me to sort of, hey, look at me, but it was fun.
A little bit different than pool competitions.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, we had to figure out, some of the races would put you up, and sometimes we had to figure it out on our own. But like in we stayed at families in Lake St. John, and that was the first time I ate walleye. I remember Mrs. Morin, is her name, cooked us this, and I thought that was the best thing in the world. Yeah, I still remember it to this day.
For those of you who don't know, it's a member of the pike family. It can be incredibly big, lots of bones, but incredibly flavorful.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so we kind of traveled around and said, all right, now we're going to drive to this place. And back then we used maps, and so we're like, all right, we're going to go here. And maybe we stop off in Quebec City. And Claudio Plitt was kind of the, funny to call him an elder statesman, because he was 2 years older than us, but he had been on the circuit for quite a while, and he seemed to know everything. So he was, he'd show up and go, well, where should we eat? And he told us about La Crêpe Bretonne and Quebec City and different places. He would kind of he'd give us a lot of guidance, which was pretty generous of him. Yeah.
And was this a real summer job, or did you were you a bit better off painting houses back home?
No, I mean, you made money for sure. I mean, if you placed, and I was usually somewhere between second and third, Paul and Claudio, depending on who was swimming well that day. But, so, you'd come away with a $3,000 or $4,000 check or something like that. Or, different places, you got paid different ways. And so it was a great way to make some money over the summer. And then they had sprints, some races where if you could sprint, and I was usually better at those because I could kind of gear myself up for 30 minutes in the middle of something or at the end of a race in Magog. If the last 1K, they had a prize money thing, and I could, even if I wasn't doing that well in the race, gear myself up to go fast for that 20 minutes. And for $500 or whatever it was. Yeah.
And then you also you traveled to Argentina. To tell us what did Claudio collect you at the airport and show you around, or?
No, that one I got a lot of good advice. There was a swimmer who swam in Indiana before I did, but I knew him, Bill Heiss, who swam. He was a good friend of John Kinsella's, and he did all these things a lot more with the same spirit that I did, which was kind of for the adventure. And he gave me a lot of good advice about Argentina. Although I think I did well, because on the way down, I'm like, oh, okay, it's a long flight. And I talked my doctor into give me Ambien or something to sleep on the plane. And I think I slept for like 3 days. I got there, I was so tired. I just remember staying in the hotel room, and I was getting all down thinking, I'm going to do terrible here. I can't even get up to go swim. And apparently I didn't react well to the Ambien. And then after that, I got out and did some swims. And so I was pretty well rested for the race, and ended up, of course, doing well. But it was, the organization down there, again, is everyone was super helpful and welcoming. There was a Carlos Larriera, who was a former swimmer. His son swam too, but he was I think he was a radio DJ, maybe a radio announcer and a journalist, but he was from down there and very helpful as well. Everywhere, all these places had somebody who, usually more than one person, but you'd find one person that would sort of help take you under their wing and help you out a lot, and say, okay, here's what we're going to do now. And then, hey, the swimmers have to show up at this for this presentation or for the news channel. Or we were even on a talk show in Argentina. I speak terrible Spanish, but I thought I was doing just great chatting away. I'm sure I just like an idiot,
So in for epic swimmers, they get on a boat in Dover with their crew. They don't see anybody except somebody sleeping rough on the sidewalk, a footpath in Britain, and they swim across to France, and they climb on a rock. There's maybe one disinterested dog that sniffs at them. They get back in the water, swim over to the boat, and have a beer when they get back to Dover. And 3 people say, "Well done." These Argentinian swims and even the swims in Quebec. Describe the crowd you were swimming through and to. And
well, yeah, every of course the layout of the race had a lot to do with it. But in actually, Atlantic City to Quebec, all the races had boats following you. In Lake St. John, there was each race had its own personality, right? So Magog, you swim from Newport, Vermont, you swim across the border to Quebec. If you took the bus down from Magog, you had to leave at like 3 a.m, and you had to cross the border with all sorts of people from all sorts of countries, and that was always a big adventure. After that, Paul and I just started going down, and probably a number of other people, spending the night down in Magog on our own. And then I remember handing my keys to a stranger. I said, "Are you going back to Magog?" "Yes, I am." I'm like, "Could you drive my car back?" Because they were down there with a car full of people. Like, "Could you drive my car back?" And which, when you think about it, driving over the border, it's kind of a crazy thing these days. But yeah, I was like, well, what am I going to do? So I handed my keys to somebody, because I'm not a good planner. And they were up there, gave me my keys at the end of the race to the car. But but then along the way, at the beginning, all these people, you're starting at 6:37 in the morning, something like that. And, it's cold and everybody's sitting around, all the swimmers, and kind of looking at each other, sort of smiling nervously. And, we got a long day ahead of us kind of thing, but you have to wave to everybody. And that was fun. And people want pictures, and you're greasing up and you're getting ready. And then when it's time for the swim, it's pretty, it's pretty disorienting. You're in the water. There's a bunch of boats up there waiting for you. Every swimmer has their own boat. And then there's a whole lot of other boats that are just going to kind of tag along and follow you the whole way up. Some of them probably met us halfway up, but as the day goes on, particularly if you're near the front, you get a whole bunch of and maybe, I don't know, probably everywhere, but you get a lot of people following along and cheering for you, and they're having a big party. That really helped when you're getting tired and you're seeing somebody up ahead, and maybe you're catching them, and maybe someone's behind you, and your trainer says, okay, they're gaining on you, and you're, do I care? And then, you know,
Is there anything I can do about it? Maybe.
well, is there anything I can do about it? And then, sadly, like, who is it? Is it somebody I think I can beat, or is it somebody I expect to run me down? And that's part of the psychology, of course, of racing, swimming. But it's that race, Lake St. John, the same thing. You're getting in this bitter cold water, and it's dark out. I don't know what time we started there, 5:30 in the morning or 6. It must have been. Everybody had been up partying all night long. Not the swimmers, but all these people are walking around clearly, having had a ton to drink. And then you jump in this water and you're like, what again? What am I doing? I don't know that I can last in here 10 minutes, much less swim across the lake. And everyone says, oh, it gets warmer when you get out of the river. But again, you're kind of disoriented. And your perspective is, once you find your boat, the boat, it's not, you don't have any idea where you are really. That was always an exciting, part, because it's like, I hope I'm going the right way, and kind of looking around to see where everyone else is going.
And then Argentina is warm water.
Argentina's warm water, and I never minded too warm. But and that one had just people, I think someone said there were 100,000 people along the way. You'd be swimming along, and flying in Argentina, you look down and it's all this kind of muddy water and what looks like meandering, I'm like, am I going to swim there? Is that, are we flying over what I'm going to swim in? And we were, I guess. And but again, once you start swimming, it's and then there's tons of boats down there. There's like big boats with bands on them, and people having I think they might win for the most decorated and celebratory boats. I mean, people with those big drums and horns and stuff, and then you're going along, and everyone loves to grill, to grill in Argentina. So all along the way, people are out there having their big picnics with their grills and cooking meat, and it was pretty, it was pretty fascinating to see that many people. And that year in '87. I didn't even realize it, but the president minimum, I did see this big helicopter as I was coming into the finish. There was this gigantic helicopter, and I'm like, well, that's kind of strange, but at the end of the day, everything's strange. And then you get out, and President Minimum was there, and he'd walked across me on the stage, and then I think one of the Argentinians said to me that was the president. I'm like, oh wow.
So when you watch the Olympics, you must think it's a bit clinical.
Well,
no boats, no grills, no parties, no waving women, no parade.
Pool swimming is a lot different, that's for sure. And
I'm talking about the 10K.
Oh, well, that one too, yeah. Well, and now, I mean, back then, somewhere, I guess in the late '80s or early '90s is when everybody started drafting off each other. And that didn't happen when we swam. I mean, not maybe if we did, there was sometimes a 10K sprint a few days before the race. And and maybe there, but when we swam the marathons, people didn't do that. I don't, and I'm not sure how I feel about it. It would have been a lot nicer, that's for sure. I mean, I probably would have done better if I could have just stayed on someone's feet the whole way and then sprinted at the end. But it's it's a different. I mean, clearly 10K that kind of lends itself to that, and because you don't really need a boat next to you for a 10K.
And I think for a lot of the 10Ks, they're in water a little bit more pleasant and calmer than you were swimming in.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's more controlled environment. They have to for they don't think they were as concerned with that stuff.
Last question, James. What was your favorite trip?
They were all good, I mean, of course, Argentina, because I won one finally, but it was um they were all good. I don't really there was no bad ones. Maybe my favorite trip is when I decided not to care at all. In my last year, I decided my little motto was make this work for me. And I knew about all these European swims that weren't quite as long. And I had quit my job. I was 32 years old or something, and got this free ticket to swim in Australia. And I was kind of tired of doing this every year and training and waking up at 4:30 to go swim with this age group team and stuff. And I thought, but I quit my job to go do this race in Australia. And I thought, why don't I just travel and make swimming work for me? So I went from there, stayed in Australia, trained with Shelly for 4 months, and then traveled around first, and then went and stayed with her for 4 months or a few months in Perth and trained. Then went to Argentina, and then did a race in Brazil. But Claudia, I just stayed down there, and Claudia was like, "Hey, there's a race in Brazil. You want to go?" Like, sure. A smaller race that wasn't part of the big circuit. And then just traveled through South America for 4 months, and just had such a great time. Stayed with Claudio and Maru for a little while, and Mar del Plata, and she made me speak Spanish the whole time, which was great for my Spanish. And since I was about to travel through, so that was great. And then I went to Italy and swam. They had this. I don't know if they had it just that 1 year, but they had this sort of, every day or two up in the Italian Riviera, like a different race, and like 3 mile or 3 hours, 4 hour type races, a series, and did that, and then did the Capri, and then all the regular swimmers on the circuit went over to North America to swim, and I stayed there. And I don't know if you know Sergio Carandini, but I said, "Hey, can I do these Italian races with you?" And he goes, "Yeah." So there's all these Italian races, like these little, in beautiful places, of course, where they put you up Fiji, and you make $300 or $400 here and there. And so I stayed with him in Florence for a couple of months, and we'd go do these races every couple of weeks. They'd have one usually, and then so that was probably the most life-changing trip.
At age 32, wow.
Yeah, because it changed how, for me, it was like, all right, I'm just going to take advantage of the one thing I can do well, and not worry. I mean, Sergio and I didn't train at all between the races, but we'd go to the pool and they'd just look at each other, well, let's go have some pizza or something. But so, it's crowded, or we'd make up some excuse to leave. But I'd say in some ways that was my best, but that was just more of a culmination because of all the other years. Every year was a blast, I'd say.
Well, James, thank you very much for sharing with us. As I say, these days aren't coming back, and
No.
you were part of a unique group of swimmers that had these incredible North American summers, I'll call them. But thank you very much, and stay well.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
Take care.